The one-time pad is mathematically proven to be perfectly secure. For any ciphertext, every possible plaintext of that length is equally likely. Shannon proved this in 1949. That guarantee rests on 4 strict rules. In this lesson, we'll look at what happens when those rules break down, the algebra, the history, and the real attacks that followed. Remember the 4 rules. The key must be truly random, as long as a message, used only once, and kept secret. Each one violated opens a different line of attack. If the key isn't truly random, if it's the output of a pseudo-random generator, the cipher is only as strong as that generator. We'll come back to this one. Shorten the key below message length and let it wrap, and you've just reinvented the Visionaire cipher, which we've already shown is perfectly breakable. If the same key encrypts 2 messages, even just 2, the cipher falls apart completely in a way that's spectacular and worth showing in detail. We'll start there. And if the key leaks to the attacker, there's nothing to discuss. The whole point was to keep the key secret. Let's start with the 3rd rule of the one-time pad. The key must be used exactly once. Reusing a key, even for just 2 messages, is a critical failure. If an attacker intercepts 2 ciphertexts produced with the same key, they can recover both plaintexts without ever learning what the key is. This is the 2-time pad attack. Here's the setup. Alice has 2 messages, hello and meet, and a single shared key. She reuses that key for both encryptions, producing ciphertext C1 from the first message and C2 from the second. An attacker intercepts both ciphertexts. On their own, they look like random bytes. Nothing in either one reveals the message or the key. But XOR both together and watch what happens. Substitute what C1 and C2 actually are, and you get this expansion. P1 XOR K, XOR P2, XOR K. Look at the right-hand side. The key K appears in both terms, because both ciphertexts came from the same key. XOR is self-inverse. Anything XORed with itself is 0. K XOR K vanishes. The key cancels out the expression entirely. What remains is P1 XOR P2. That hex row at the bottom isn't noise and it isn't the key, it's the 2 plaintexts mixed together, with the key nowhere in it. No guessing, no brute force. The attacker exploited key reuse, and the algebra removed the key automatically. The attacker now has C1 XOR C2. That's equal to P1 XOR P2. The key is completely absent, but the 2 plaintexts are still tangled up together in there. So, how do you separate them? By using a technique called crib dragging. Wartime codebreakers invented the name. The idea is to guess a word you think appears in one of the messages. That guessed word is the crib. For English text, common words work well as starting points. Hello, meet, the, and. We'll try hello. The key insight. If your crib matches position n in one plaintext, XORing it against the combined stream at position n produces the corresponding characters from the other plaintext. Starting at position 3, hello XORed against the stream gives us junk and non-printable characters, not English, no match. Shift 1 position to the left, at position 2 we get more garbage, no match here either. Position 1 gives non-printable characters again, still no match. Position 0, meet, 4 letters and a space, that's valid English, the crib matched. 2 things drop out of this. Hello sits at position 0 in the first message, that was our crib, and since the XOR produced meet, the second message begins here too. We've now recovered both plaintexts, and we did it without finding the key, brute forcing, or breaking the Vernam cipher. Key reuse alone was enough. That attack has a history. In the 1940s, US and UK cryptanalysts applied exactly this method to Soviet diplomatic cables, and kept doing it for nearly 40 years. The program was codenamed VENONA. We'll look at how the failure happened, how it was exploited, and what the decrypts revealed. During the Second World War, Soviet intelligence, the NKVD and GRU, used one-time pads for their most sensitive diplomatic and espionage cables. Properly used, one-time pads are mathematically unbreakable. We proved that in the previous lesson. The failure here didn't come from cryptography, it came from logistics. In 1942, under pressure to produce key material faster, a Soviet factory duplicated pages of one-time pad tapes and distributed them to different field stations. The same key pages were now being used to encrypt different messages at different locations. That's the 2-time pad violation, exactly the scenario we just played out. Cryptanalysts at the US Army's Signal Security Agency started seeing patterns in a Soviet traffic that shouldn't have been there, consistent with key reuse. They applied the two-time pad method, XOR pairs of ciphertext, drag crypts across the combined stream, look for real messages. The first successful decryption came in 1946. The project ran quietly under the codename VENONA for nearly 4 decades. Over 3,000 intercepted cables were eventually processed and partially or fully decrypted. What the decrypt revealed changed the course of the Cold War. VENONA identified Soviet intelligence networks that had penetrated the Manhattan Project and the British government. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, convicted and executed in 1953 for passing nuclear weapon designs to Soviet intelligence, both identified in the VENONA decrypts. Klaus Fuchs, a British physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project and passed weapon design data directly to Moscow, he surfaces in the cables too. Kim Philby, who held a senior position running Soviet counterintelligence inside MI6, also surfaced in the VENONA cables. The program was declassified in 1995, 50 years after the first break. All of it flows from one equation. Ciphertext 1, XORed with ciphertext 2, gives you plaintext 1, XORed with plaintext 2. Again, look at the right-hand side. No key. The key cancelled out of the algebra completely, regardless of whose cables they were. This one factory's mistake duplicating batches of key pages under time pressure led to the defeat of an unbreakable cipher and one of the most consequential intelligence breaks of the 20th century. Before we go on, I've been training people for over a decade. I've produced paid courses, lessons on private platforms, all of my content has been behind paywalls, and I do this alongside a full-time job. This is the first course I've put out for free. Why? Because I wanted it to reach people who wouldn't otherwise find it. That's what this channel is. So, if you're enjoying this course so far, subscribe so YouTube brings you the rest of it. Give this video a like so it reaches other people, and if you know someone who genuinely gets something from this, share it with them. That's how a free course finds the people it's for, and you can make a world of difference. WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy, was a security protocol built into the 802.11b wireless standard. Every Wi-Fi router shipped from 1999 onwards included it. The engineers knew about key reuse. They designed a mechanism specifically to prevent it. That mechanism had a flaw, and the flaw was mathematical. WEP's base key is a 40 or 104-bit secret configured on the router and shared with every client. These bytes don't change, they stay fixed across every packet. Each transmission also carries a 24-bit initialization vector, 3 random bytes generated fresh per packet. That's the mechanism designed to prevent key reuse. The base key and the IV get concatenated and fed into RC4, a stream cipher that expands the combined input into a pseudo-random byte stream, the key stream. RC4 is deterministic. This means the same key plus the same IV always produce the exact same key stream. Here's how that key stream gets used. Take a plaintext payload, hello. Each character maps to a byte value in ASCII, shown on screen. Each plaintext byte is XORed against the corresponding keystream byte, column by column across the stream. XOR them column by column and out comes the ciphertext. Those bytes reveal nothing without the keystream, and reconstructing the keystream needs both the base key and the IV. The transmitted packet is assembled from these two parts. The IV, 3 bytes, sent in plaintext so the receiver can regenerate the keystream, followed by the ciphertext. The IV is the only thing that changes between packets. The base key is static. So if any 2 packets share an IV, they share a key stream, and that's the 2-time pad rebuilt. Every device on a WEP network shares one secret, the base key. It's pre-configured on the router and on each client, never transmitted across the air. When the router has data to send, it generates a fresh IV, runs IC4, and XORs a payload. The transmitted packet is exactly 2 fields, the IV in plaintext, followed by the ciphertext. That packet travels over the air. Anyone in radio range can intercept it. You don't even need to be on the network. The IV is fully readable. It's in plaintext by design, so the receiver can regenerate the key stream, but the ciphertext is opaque. Without the base key, there's nothing to do with it. The packet continues to the client. It reads the IV, retrieves its copy of the base key, reconstructs the exact same RC4 keystream, and XORs back to recover the plaintext. The 24-bit IV gives just under 17 million possible values. On first glance, that sounds like a lot. But 802.11b can push thousands of packets per second. On a busy access point, the entire IV space exhausts in a matter of hours. After that, values start repeating. Packet 1, transmitted with a particular IV. That IV, combined with the base key, produces a specific RC4 keystream, unique to that combination. Later, a second packet arrives with the same IV, but it will also have the same base key, so we get an identical RC4 starting state, in other words, an identical keystream. XOR the two ciphertexts and the keystream cancels out completely. The same two-time pad attack applies directly, crib drag across the combined stream and both plaintexts fall out. Fleurer, Manton and Shamir published the full analysis in 2001. By 2003, Aircrack NG had automated the entire process. Any WEP network cracked in under 5 minutes from captured traffic. IEEE deprecated WEP in 2004. Shannon's theorem doesn't expire. The same arithmetic that broke Soviet cables in 1946 brought down home Wi-Fi routers 50 years later. In 1995, Netscape Navigator's SSL used RC4 with a 128-bit key for every HTTPS session. We've already seen how RC4 was applied in WEP. This section is about where that 128-bit key came from. A one-time pad requires a key as long as the message, genuinely random, never reused, mathematically perfect. Operationally brutal, a stream cipher solves the length problem. Instead of a long random key, a stream cipher takes a short seed and feeds it into a PRNG, a pseudo-random number generator, which expands it into a keystream of whatever length you need. Here's the critical property of a pseudo-random number generator. It's deterministic. And we already know the problem with that. Same seed in, same byte sequence out, every time. The receiver runs the same pseudo-random number generator with the same seed and gets the same keystream. Here's the same seed fed into two separate PRNG calls. The output is byte for byte identical, not because the bytes look similar, but because the function is a pure calculation. And here's the point. Just like WEP, the seed is the key. A 128-bit keystream generated from a 20-bit seed isn't 128-bit security, it's 20-bit security. The keystream can be as long as you like. What matters is the size of the space the seed is drawn from. Quick recap. Netscape Navigator's SSL used RC4, a stream cipher, with a 128-bit key generated fresh for each HTTPS session. On paper, 128 bits is well beyond brute force, more possible keys than atoms in the observable universe. The key was generated by a pseudo-random number generator. The seed for that PRNG came from 3 values read from the system at the moment the SSL session opened. First, the current time, the output of the method time in seconds since the Unix epoch, the exact second the browser initiated the connection. Second, the browser's own process ID, the output of the method getPID. On the systems of the time, process IDs were 15-bit integers, small, and visible to anyone on the machine. Third, the parent process ID, the shell or terminal that launched the browser, also a small integer, also publicly visible. These 3 values were XORed together to produce the seed. That seed then drove the RC4 generator, which produced the 128-bit keystream. Goldberg and Wagner were graduate students at Berkeley when they looked at this in 1995. Their approach was straightforward: map out exactly what an attacker already knows. The connection time is readable from packet timestamps. The attacker knows it within a few seconds. The browser PID is visible to anyone running PS on the same machine, or inferable from network connection data. The parent PID is also small and correlated. All 3 values are either observable directly or constrained to a narrow range of possibilities. Add up the time uncertainty and the realistic PID range, and the total candidate seed count is in the millions, a small number when each candidate takes microseconds to check. The attack is a simple loop. For each candidate seed, run RC4 and test whether decrypting the captured ciphertext produces valid HTTP. A match means the session key is recovered. Goldberg and Wagner reported the full search taking about 25 seconds on the hardware of the time. Any intercepted HTTPS session decrypted. Netscape patched the implementation, but the cipher was never the problem. RC4 with a genuinely random 128-bit seed is fine. The failure was in key generation, the same failure Shannon described. The key must be chosen uniformly at random from the full key space. Use a pseudo-random number generator seeded with observable constrained values, and you don't have a 128-bit key, you have a millions of candidates key with extra steps. A printing press error in 1944, a 24-bit IV counter in 1999, a time-seeded PRNG in 1995, 3 different rule violations, 3 different eras, same collapse. The maths is perfect, the humans aren't. Which raises the obvious question, can we build something that doesn't need perfection to be secure? That's what modern cryptography is, decades of work trying to recover as much of the one-time pad security as possible without any of its impossible rules.